All right, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today we've got none other than the band from Boston on the road to try to make ends meet. Boston.
Just another band out of
Yes.
Boston.
Yeah, there's so many. And
Hey,
look who we got here.
before we begin, Joey, since you mentioned Boston, and hi Davey as well. Even though we haven't been introduced, we should try to come up with a couple more bands from Boston. I got Aerosmith,
Aerosmith,
Dropkick Murphys,
Jay
Jay
Giles
Giles
Band,
Band.
Cars.
Cars. Yeah. Who
So
else?
we're on a roll. Well, how many more do you need? That's a good
Oh,
example.
Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers.
Oh, nice. That one I wouldn't have pulled out. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Look,
All right.
Davey's like.
All right, but there's a good example there. But so we're going to talk about the band Boston today, and we're going to talk about their catalog and rank all their studio albums, and we'll talk a little bit about the side projects of Boston, the offshoots, as we say. All right, so we're going to start off here. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the albums real fast, nothing fancy, just to piss Davey off. No, just kidding, but no, not to piss you off. I just want to give a quick rundown on the album so we know exactly what we're looking at here. So we're going to go reverse chronologically real quick. Obviously, we're ranking the six studio albums. We're going to go start off with the most recently released one, Life, Love, and Hope, which came out in 2013. So that one reached number 37, came out on Frontiers Records, and it was the first album to feature Tommy DiCarlo. He only sings on a few of the songs on the album, oddly enough, but in concert he does most of the singing. When the last time they toured, if you remember, when they came to Art Park Thomas. So this is the first album that was released after Brad Delp passed away, and Delp is also featured on the album in a few rearranged tracks that appeared on the last album of Corporate America that he was involved with when he was alive. So that was the 2013 release, and then before that, we had to wait 11 years, and that album was Corporate America. When it came out, it hit number 42, which at this point in time, as it stands, is the worst chart performance a Boston album has had to date. It was the final appearance for Fran Cosmo, who's the main singer on the album. And, good old Tom Schultz, he had this album pulled from all digital platforms and all retail outlets due to a dispute with the record company, which will rename nameless. And I just asked, can this guy get along with anyone?
Wow.
Is he gonna sue me? I don't know. Let's hope not.
For the record, I want to say, I will tell you my Tom Schultz story since you just badmouthed the guy. I interviewed Tom Schultz, and I'll be honest, I was intimidated by the fact I was interviewed because he did have kind of a weird reputation. He was one of the nicest guys I ever spoke to, and just very knowledgeable, and a Todd Rundgren fan, by the way, which automatically endeared him to me. But the funny thing is that I was about getting ready to interview him, and my voice recorder broke down, so I had to do the whole thing by hand. And he joked right before I hung up. He goes, "Hey, thanks. I really enjoyed this interview." I said, "Yeah, man. I'm sorry I was a little slow because I said I had to take notes by hand." And he goes, "Oh yeah." I said, "If anybody can understand about tape recorders not working, it's me," which I thought was really funny. And he said, "But in all seriousness, Tom, if you need anything else, by all means, get back in touch with me and I'll confirm any quotes or any of that kind of stuff." And I just thought it was great, And I've seen interviews with him. He's an engineering guy, and I think that sometimes those engineering people can become off-putting because they may think a little bit different than the average people. But my personal experience with Tom Schultz, great guy. I could see where he'd be difficult to work with because his records sound ridiculously perfect. You know what I mean? Like and I can't imagine where he's going to tolerate a lot of guys showing up to the studio drunk or whatever. What do you think of that, Davey? You agree with me on that?
Yes, or late.
Yeah. So that's it. So maybe that's where he gets his bad reputation.
right. So obviously I was only joking when I said, can this
I
guy get along with
know.
anyone? But
I don't think
it's
you were
only
joking.
only
And
due to the many lawsuits the guys had to endure throughout the whole course of Boston. You know, it's been a lot of them, and he seems like the poor guy's always in court. So, all right, moving on, and then we can get into the rankings, which is going to be good. 1994 was next, and that's Walk On. Went platinum, reached number 7. Fran Cosmo, first album with him on lead vocals, and it's got the distinction of being the only Boston album without a Brad Delp vocal on it. Although he did co-write a few songs, well, basically Walk On and Walk On Some More, but and the album also features the last charting single the band ever had was I Need Your Love, which peaked at number 51. So that was it on that. And then we get into the meat of the band. We go all the way back to 1986 for the Third Stage album, which went 4 times platinum, contains the number 1 smash Amanda, and also another top 10 song, We're Ready, which made it all the way up to number 9, oddly enough. And solid album. And it was a gap of like 8 years in between and a couple lawsuits between Don't Look Back and Third Stage. But Don't Look Back came out in 1978. Also hit number 1. So that's 2 number 1 albums from the band. 7 times platinum certified. And let's see. Album was released before Schultz thought it was completed. He felt it needed another song, so he wasn't happy with the record company, and that's what kind of led to that whole thing going on there. Originally was to be retitled Arrival, but they changed the name when they saw ABBA had a name of the album already out under that same title. And oddly enough, the only 2 albums of the catalog that are exact same lineups are the first 2, the debut and Don't Look Back. And then that takes us to the debut, 1976, considered one of the greatest debuts of all time. Right now it stands at 17 times platinum, reached number 3. And interesting story there with the drummer Hashi, and he had to come aboard to replace the original drummer because Epic Records demanded that they replace the guy that they had on there. I guess they didn't like his studio work there. So he's heard on the debut, and he did also play on the follow-up Don't Look Back. Although many of the drum parts he's played, it says were just note for note transcriptions of the original drummer's arrangements. So not sure what all happened there. There's more to the story, I'm sure.
And he died. If I'm correct, he died in concert.
Yeah, he was on some cruise.
He was on a cruise, yeah, and he died while he was playing.
Yeah, so he was also involved with the early sessions for Third Stage, but later was replaced by that drummer who he took over for way back in 1976 there. And all 3 singles released. It's hard to believe that album only had 3 singles released, but they all reached the top 40 with More Than a Feeling reaching number 5. So it's kind of surprising that, considering the amount of album songs you hear from that album in concert, that only 3 of them were released as singles. Because they could have definitely released a lot more and probably pushed it to even bigger sales at that time.
Yeah, that was AOR days. I mean, you got to remember, I mean, that's the thing with Boston is like it took them so long to come out with 6 records that just the way records were pushed changed significantly. I mean, it's 76-ish or whenever the first one came out. Is it 76? Yeah. No, it's 70. Yeah, 76. Yeah, 76. Yes, okay. And it was like, well, here's the funny thing. So 76, you're getting album cuts, so you could play some of the longer cuts, which by 1980s, you're looking at MTV, so they're not playing any long songs. And man, it's like 76, and then Don't Look Back takes 2 years to come out, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is a lifetime, I mean, it's funny because everybody expected an album a year, especially if you were hot. And
hey, Thin Lizzy released 2 albums in 1976.
Yeah, well, the Beatles released 13 in 6 years. I mean, it's CCR. It had like 10 in 4 years. I mean, yeah, it's
Elton John used to release 2 albums a year.
Yeah, Rush every year. You could almost mark your calendar for a long time.
Yeah,
but anyhow, I digress.
All right, so we're going to go in the order. We'll let Davey go first this time. and then Tom second like always, and me last like always. So we can
Just
keep our order somewhat in order.
Starting out at number 6.
Yes.
My sixth choice, produced by Tom Scholz, Gary Pill, and the Cosmo son and father duo from 2002, Corporate America. And this album, as Joey said, came 8 years after their previous record. I think the song I Had a Good Time, the first track on the album, is pretty good. It sounds like Boston. But after that, I don't know. There's female vocals on the record. I love female vocalists. I'm a big fan of Stevie Nicks, Chrissy Hynde from The Pretenders, Tori Amos, Shirley Manson from Garbage, just Ann and Nancy from Heart, Annie Haslam from Renaissance. But female vocals on a Boston album, it just never hit me the right way. I guess he didn't want to replace another male voice, so he used a high female voice, Tom Scholz. But I don't know. I just don't like this record that much. And I think I could sum up the bulk of the album after track 1, After I Had a Good Time, by quoting the song title. Number 6 song on the album is called Turn It Off. And that's what I would say for this album. Turn it off after the first track.
Ooh.
That's my number 6, Corporate America.
Well, let's see what Tom has to say.
That's the greatest album ranking statement ever.
Thank you.
See, how am I supposed to follow that up? You know, all I got, there's a part of me that wants to mess with you and just make Corporate America my first album. Like, I feel like switching my list up, but I'll get all indignant. Like I gave poor Joey grief about Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Like,
oh, there we
"What do you
go.
mean
She's
this is a
sticking it in
horrible
there
album?"
again.
Well, today as we're recording is Peter Gabriel's birthday. So
yeah.
There you go. So I agree with literally everything you said, and it was my 6th choice. So yeah, Corporate America. It's but I don't think it's a stinker. I mean, it's okay. And if as far as the female vocalist, man, when we saw them in, what did we say? It was 2013, Joey? They had
2014.
14 or whatever. We saw them, and they had a young lady from America. It was like an American Idol contestant or something like that. She came on and sang a couple of songs with him. Yeah, let's be honest. Boston is Tom Scholz's solo project. With the name Boston, he can bring whoever he wants on, and it's going to be a little bit different. But yeah, but generally speaking, I just don't think the song quality was there. Obviously, Tom has some issues with it as well, because in as much as there was a dispute with the label over streaming and all that other stuff, if Tom really liked this album, I think he would push harder to get it on streaming platforms for people to listen to. But yeah, it just didn't quite live up to the standards of the other records in the catalog.
All right. Well, there we go.
In fact, to quote one of the lyrics in the songs, I think the actual lyrics, and I might be wrong, they are, this album should be ranked number 6. Was that the lyrics? Which song was that?
Turn It Off.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead, Joey.
My number 6 is something different. So we already disagree.
Your number 1 better
Yes.
not be Corporate America.
Hey, I'm a corporate kind of guy. So here we go. Number 6 for me is Walk On. And pretty much the way Davey described the other one, there's only a handful of songs that I can really like on this album. And I think the main problem that I have with it is no Brad Delp. I just feel that that's the problem with this album. As much as Fran Cosmo is okay on it, Brad Delp on this album would have made this album a lot better in my estimation. That's why it's my number 6. So I Need Your Love, obviously, a couple of these songs, stand out a little bit. Living for You, What's Your Name, We Can Make It. But the rest of it is, I expected better. This is the first signs of Boston after the first three albums, this is definitely not the way you want the fourth album to come out and go. You know, even though I think it only went platinum is the only reason why it went platinum was because, you know, there's still a lot of Boston fans out there and they just wanted to get it and see how they liked it. And I bet you now hardly anybody has kept their copies that they bought. It's just not a great album at all, in my estimation. I kind of like this album, like Tom likes Corporate America. It's not a stinker, but it's somewhere between a stinker and good. So that's why I would just walk on from it.
Oh.
Touche.
You guys all got my pun disease today.
Actually, I had that planned already way before Davey came up with his
Nice.
thing.
Nice.
All right, go ahead. Let's go with number 5.
Coming in at number 5, produced by Tom Scholz. But which one is it? Coming hot on the heels. 11 years after Corporate America. 11 years between records. Come on. Life, Love, and Hope from 2013. I think it's marginally better than Corporate America, but I don't think it's a great album. And the fact that they did different takes of 3 songs from Corporate America, I think Tom Scholz was a little bereft of ideas at this point. So it's really only about 6 or 7 new songs, which is more like an EP, because Boston records are usually notoriously short. And Tom Scholz sings a song on here. Tom, get a singer. Please don't sing. I would tell the same thing to Steve Howe from Yes, and I'm a huge Yes fan. A couple of records ago, Steve Howe sang a song. Steve Howe, you are my favorite guitar player, but please don't sing. And I say the same thing respectfully to Mr. Scholz. You're a musical genius, you're a creative genius, but do the backing vocals. Thank you very much.
You forgot Eddie Van Halen, Don't Sing, right?
Oh, yeah, that's another one from the Gary Sharon album. Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I just got chills. And I left out a word there. Let's see. What else did I write down? That's basically it. I wrote, it's not as bad in my mind as Corporate America, but to me, it's very forgettable. So that's why it's my number 5. Life, Love, and Hope. I can't even remember the title. I have to keep looking down.
All right.
I'm just going to change my first name to Parrot. Yeah, that's mine as well. Number 5, Life, Love, and Hope. I hoped this would be better. No. Slightly. I like this record. I remember when it came out, I was sent a review copy of it. It's like one of the last albums that I've actually received a physical copy in any form. Now everything gets sent to you digitally. But yeah, to me, I guess the issue I have with this particular record is it just seems a bit uneven in terms of just it doesn't really flow together well. Like it doesn't feel like it's tracked perfectly. You know, I mean, it's one thing about like that first Boston record. I mean, everything is just, the sequencing is just outstanding. But song quality, you know, good. But yeah, it's, I think the tough part too is that, you know, Boston was known for a particular sound. I think Tom Scholz tried to kind of stretch himself a little bit on some of these things by doing like lead vocals himself or whatever. But again, this doesn't, I mean, the reality is that those last 2 Boston records are just Tom Scholz solo records. They really are. I mean, because it's just a changing cast of players. I think Gary Peel's the only one from, I don't even know, was he on Third Stage? I know he was on a tour.
Yeah.
Well, he did the tour.
Yeah, and I interviewed him, by the way. And he was a great guy. Yeah, very nice guy.
Played with Sammy Hagar for years too.
Saw him play with Sammy. Yeah, he was great. I mean, that band, I mean, of all Sammy's solo bands, that was the best. The one with Gary. And I think Denny Carmisi was on drums, and I forget who the bass player was, but it was that was a fun group. It was a fun group. And then he left for, you know, to play with a couple of brothers, and there was a fallout. I don't know, something like that.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you guys. Number 5,
Oh, yay.
Life, Live and Hope. We're all in agreement. That's see how many more times that will happen today.
Yep.
You hit the nail on the head, Tom, when you said uneven album. I think the problem is you got so many different vocalists on it, and the styles and the way it was sequenced just not as good as it could have been. But I do find DeCarlo, his first appearance on the album, did well for the few songs that he sang. Like the title cut, and that's one standout track. I mean, I like the first couple, Heaven on Earth and Didn't Mean to Fall in Love. They kick off pretty nicely. They're listenable, enjoyable songs. But then, towards the end of the album is where it kind of goes away from me there. You got a lot of these redone songs, like you said, and although the music sounds all right, the songs just aren't catchy, you know, and that's the problem. You're not, you're used to a certain level a Boston song has, and these songs are just like some of them feel like demos in a way, you know.
But they probably were.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was released on Frontiers. They usually try to put out really good material. But obviously the Brad Delp songs on there, he sang a couple of them were just redones that, were done posthumously. What else can you say? But yeah, we're all in agreement with this one. So there's not much more to talk about there. So let's get on with number 4.
Uh-oh, number 4. Get ready. This was produced by Tom Scholz.
What?
Guesses, anyone? Guesses?
What?
I would say it's you're gonna do some walking.
No.
We
Don't
could
look
be
back.
Wow.
Don't Look Back from 1978, their second record. And I think it's a big drop off from the debut. It's too short. It's 3 minutes shorter than the debut album. And they needed another song on there. There was an unreleased song because I've heard it on bootlegs from back when I worked in the record stores and we played bootlegs on CD. There's an unreleased song called Television Something. Television, maybe Personality. I can't remember the song title. Why didn't they put that on there? And like you said before, Tom, or was it Joey? One of you guys said that the record label made him release the record. He didn't feel it was ready. And I just think it's inferior to the first album. I just think there's a big drop off. My 3 favorite songs on here, definitely the title track, Don't Look Back. The devastatingly beautiful A Man I'll Never Be. That's a great song. I think that's the highlight on the record. And I like the Brad Delp penned Used to Bad News. But some of the other songs, they don't hit me like the stuff on the debut. So that's why it's my number 4.
Yeah, dude, I'm with you. I mean, I wrote it down. I'm not just pulling these out of the sky. I don't look at the rest of the list. But yeah, my number, that's mine. Don't Look Back.
Oh, wow.
And
I thought I'd be the only one.
No, it sits so far in the shadow of the first record. It's just such a drop off. I mean, well, I don't want to say that. I would say that the problem with it is that it's too much like an attempt to replicate the first album. There was really nothing that was, they didn't introduce anything that was earth shattering, and again, I think that in terms of like songs, okay, Don't Look Back, great song, but it kind of sounds like More Than a Feeling, whatever. I mean, it's very similar to that. My favorite song on here is Feeling Satisfied. I think that's got a great
good
hook in the middle. Party, actually the first time I saw them was on the Third Stage tour, and that was their final song. It was their final encore. And I thought it was anticlimactic because it's just, hey, we're having a party. Yeah. It's like party. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't hate this record. Again, it's a great record. I mean, it was, and I'm sure people weren't like, oh, this record sucks, but man, it's kind of like, yeah, it definitely, because I think it suffers because, and you could tell Scholz again said he didn't want to put it out right away. They could have used another year or two to just kind of maybe get a couple more songs or stretch themselves out creatively.
But back then, 2 years was unheard of to wait for a record.
For
That's
sure.
why
But
CBS was freaking out. Give us a record, give us a record, give us a record. They forced his hand.
yeah. Well, it said some bands could do it and some bands couldn't. I think just because of the nature of Boston's music, which the arrangements tend to be very complex and they, sonically you have a certain standard that you've set that it has to just be a meticulous effort to record a Boston song. And that's the engineer, the MIT guy, Tom Schultz. So
Yes,
he's
but it's
he's
to
a
the detriment.
perfectionist.
It's to the detriment of the band that he takes too long.
Nah, it's his band. It's his project. I mean, the first record was basically him. I mean, and
Playing almost everything. Yes.
yeah, it was him. He doesn't need anybody else. And what's weird is like we haven't really brought up the other, the Orion the Hunter or the Barry Goudreau records, but like, you listen to that other stuff where they try to, or Return to Zero, where they try to sound like Boston. They do a good job with the songs, but they can't get the sound. They fall short. That's
Well, I don't
just
think
the
they were.
reality.
I don't think they were trying to get the exact Boston sound. They were trying to make it be a project to stand on its own. It just
Oh
had
Lord,
all the members of
Barry
Boston.
Goudreau, that Barry Goudreau record is just his attempt to show that he had a bigger role in Boston than he really did.
Yeah, for that one.
That's all it is.
But we're going to save that for the end. That's why we haven't brought it up yet.
Yeah.
So keep those thoughts in mind. All right. So we're going to move on to my number 4. Any guesses?
It ain't Don't Look Back, I bet.
Nope. Don't Look Back. It's going to be the one that you guys put last. Corporate America. So I am a corporate guy, but not all the way to number 1. So, so number 4, Corporate America. Like Davey said, I had a good time. Kicks off okay. Stare out your window is good. And I was thinking, then all of a sudden I started noticing the album fading as I was playing it from, right from the beginning, right on through. Then all of a sudden I get to Turn It Off, which is the song that, you guys are making a joke about, but in actuality, that song is actually a pretty damn good song, Turn It Off, if you ever actually listened to, heard it pretty good. And then all of a sudden, like everything after that just sounded so good. So I mean, it's like I actually replayed it after I heard it. Because I'll admit I wasn't too familiar with this album. I never had it, never owned it. But yeah, I definitely feel it's their 4th best album. It's just there's a lot of good stuff on here. Even with, and obviously Fran Cosmo, took over here. I think he did a fairly good job, and Brad Delp came back and sang on it a little bit too, but stuff here. So Corporate America is definitely not as bad as you guys made out to be, at least in my book. So I enjoyed it. So, and I think it's a solid album. And like you said with Schultz, do you have any idea when he actually pulled those albums out of the stores and everything, when that all happened? What year, Tom?
I don't think it was that long ago. I mean, it
was
has
kinda
more to
recent?
it was the streaming platform, so I thought it was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember hearing about that, so I was just kind of surprised when I was following up on it.
Oh,
Well,
we're starting to see we're starting to see a lot more of that. It's I find it, even like I use Amazon Music as my streaming service, and I pay for the premium version, and I'm starting to see a lot of catalogs where there's just some gaping holes in it. It's really weird.
yeah, like I heard the Different Kind of Truth, the Van Halen album, got yanked. David Lee
That's
Roth
because of
was, yeah.
David Lee Roth doesn't like it. That's why.
Yeah, so they never renegotiate. Well, I guess like with that one, it's the same Corporate America that every now and then you got to renegotiate the contract. So maybe you have an initial like 5 or 10 years or whatever. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe if they just don't feel like they want it, and maybe they just make so little money on it, they just say, it's not worth the headaches to get a check for 35 cents and get pissed off. I mean, the real money's in licensing to commercials or movies or things like that. I think, hopefully they're going to have to come up with some other revenue model for artists, especially some of these heritage artists. And I think that's too with the vinyl resurgence. You're starting to see a lot of records exclusively on vinyl, you know,
Yeah.
and that makes it makes the vinyl copy more valuable and kind of forces the consumer's hands, and the artist makes more money on it. And I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to leave us down to the top 3. What do you got there, Davey?
Number 3, once again, produced by a gentleman by the name of Tom Scholz. Can you believe it?
Shocking. They must have liked working with him.
Coming in at number 3 from 1994, the band's 4th album, Walk On. I think I like this album a lot more than a lot of Boston fans do.
I'll say
I was working in the record store, and with Brad Delp gone, Fran Cosmo came in, took over on the vocals, and with the exception of the song called What's Your Name, I like every other song on this record. I think it's a great record. I like the playing, the songs, the production. I would say my 3 favorites are the title track. I like a lot of the keyboard work that Tom does on organ in the middle of Walk On. Let's see, Living for You, I Need Your Love, and the last track, We Can Make It. Those are probably my favorites. So I think it's a better album than people give it credit for. So that is my number 3, Walk On.
I did. Okay. Tom.
Do I even need to say it?
Same thing.
Yeah, because if you would have put this album higher than your other last 2, I would have been. I would have fallen off my chair.
I was pretty close to putting this at number 2. I was pretty close to putting this at number 2. Really, it's you know what? I don't understand your hate for it. I think the strength in this record lies in its sequencing. It has a definite flow, and that's intentional. You know, that midsection, like the, you know, tracks 4 through 7, that's all one like big
10-minute song.
You know? Yeah. It's a great song. Living for You, I think, is one of the best Boston songs in the catalog. And what's interesting is I went back, I listened to this one, and I didn't even realize that it was Frank Cosmo until I went back and looked at it. I was like, damn, because I know that Cosmo and Delp toured, I think they toured together on this one, right? So I thought maybe they had because I didn't think Fran's vocals were that strong. This is definitely his best vocal performance, and I think he does a great job. I don't think there's enough of it. I don't think it's, I don't know, maybe it's Arnell to Steve Perry in terms of quality of the vocals, but man, there's a lot of similarities. Either way, I just think he does a great job vocally on this. It's a very strong vocal performance. Sonically, it feels it's a good record. It keeps that same sort of quality of Boston sound that we like. And even though it doesn't have many of the kind of ear candy songs that are on the first record, or even some of the stuff on Don't Look Back, as a whole, as an album, I think that this is easily the 3rd and potentially the 2nd best in the catalog.
All right, let's move on here. So I got a different album than you guys got here, obviously. So my number 3 is going to be Don't Look Back, which, to tell you the truth, it fell exactly where I expected it to fall on this Boston. When I first looked at the albums that were in question, I usually look them over and see, where do I think they're going to fall in my estimation to see how close I am once I'm done actually ranking them. And this is one that pretty much fell right on. The other 3 that we already ranked, 4 through 6, I had no idea where they were all going to fall. They could have been all mix and match because they were really close, a lot of them. It's just that Walk On was just a little, I didn't like it as much as I liked the other 2, that's all. But Don't Look Back is definitely in the right spot that it needs to be. It's the 3rd best Boston album in my estimation. Obviously Don't Look Back was the big song on the album, and you guys mentioned I think you said A Man I'll Never Be, you mentioned there, Davey, right? Yeah.
Great song.
It doesn't really have the strength of songs that Third Stage or Boston, the debut, has. but nonetheless, you know, feeling satisfied. Used to bad news. It's easy. And that journey there, the journey that kind of goes into It's Easy, interestingly enough, is very memorable. It's another highlight on the album there, right there for you. So yeah. So I mean, I think Don't Look Back, you know, like Tom, we had talked in the past, you know, where you got a super big album and there was nothing bigger than the Boston debut. So you knew no matter what they came out with was probably going to be a letdown, you know, especially when it took a long time for it to come out. And on top of it, at that point, 76 to 78. And, but I think the album, you know, it definitely, still is, it's one of those like kind of like the Good Trouble of the REO Speedwagon catalog, you know. You had to follow up High Infidelity with Good Trouble. It's similar to me in the Boston category, you know. I think it's a good album, but it's still you know, it just didn't come anywhere near the power power of the first album, that's all. So there's my number 3.
Okay, coming in at number 2, produced by Tom Scholz.
Tom Scholz.
1986, Third Stage. As Joey said, it went to number 1, 4 times platinum. Came out 8 years after Don't Look Back, which then was totally unheard of. Most people have forgotten about Boston by then, I guess. And like Tom, I did see them on this tour, and I was very surprised they did the whole album in sequence.
Correct.
It was the first time I ever saw an artist do that. And now it's very commonplace. Someone will tour a classic album, and they'll do the whole album in order. But in 1986, 1987, I think I saw them actually. I was quite surprised by that. I think this is a really good album. It hangs together very well. Good song quality, great performances. And my 3 favorites would be Amanda, Holly Ann, and Can't You Say, which is probably my favorite. So that's my number 2, Third Stage.
Yeah, my number 2 is Walk On. I'm going to rank it twice. No, I'm just kidding. It's Third Stage. Jeez, Davey. It's like we're connected.
Yes.
We are karmically connected. Yes, but I did see this one. Now, the memory plays tricks on you sometimes, but I'm almost positive, like 99% positive. And if anybody's handy, they can look it up while we're talking, that the show that I saw in Rochester, New York on the Third Stage tour was the very first show of the tour. I believe they had rented out the Rochester War Memorial and rehearsed for a week, and we had the very first show. So not only was I surprised to see them perform the record from beginning to end, there was no indication that that was going to happen. Like I said, today, typically if you go to a show, a lot of people know what the set list is by the time they come to their city, unless it's like an opening night. It was, I mean, the energy and everything, it was just so magical just to have them back. And they opened up with Rock and Roll Band. And I think, you know, the first they did 4 songs from the classic catalog. Then they did the whole Third Stage album. And at the time I was kind of like, oh, you know, I didn't know what I was a little bummed because I always liked the excitement of not knowing what the next song was.
Yes.
You know, like you try to figure out what it's going to be. And then you hear the opening notes to whatever, and you go, oh yeah, you know, it's exciting. But, yeah. And I just think this again, this is an album where they began to kind of, they stretched out a little bit. They almost dove into prog rock. It was more, you know, I mean, they're one of those bands I think that kind of gets accused of being corporate rock because it's so clean and, you know, all this other stuff. But I think this is a record that really set the stage for bands like, you know, was it the Trans-Siberian Orchestra or whatever, those, you know, those bands that have the big guitar shows and that really clean sound. But yeah, I dig this record. It's a sentimental favorite, and I think it was interesting too. Like you said, that it kind of came back at a time where you didn't really know how the public was going to accept it. And I thought Amanda was a very strong single. I like the song "Cool the Engines." I think that's just a fun, hooky song. It's got a great hook to it, and "Can't You Say You Believe in Me?" That's one of those big fat choruses that I've come to love as well. And then in between, have all this kind of interesting instrumental interplay. And here's a trivia question: who is the bass player on this record?
Is it Tom Scholz?
It's Tom Scholz. Yay! Congratulations. You win 2 tickets to the Walk On Tour. No, I'm just kidding.
And you remember the name of the opening band?
For the one in Rochester?
Well, I don't know what your show was.
I don't remember.
Well, we had a Boston band open up for us.
The Cars?
None other than Fahrenheit, who features none other than the great Charlie Farren, formerly of the Joe Perry Project. He sang on the second album. And also David Hall, who was known as Height. He also played on a lot of the first 2 Joe Perry Project albums. So we got like an Aerosmith Boston whole connection thing here. So they opened the show, and that's the tour. I don't know if you saw that. They probably opened your show, Davey.
I saw them at the Nassau Coliseum, I think it was. I don't remember an opening band.
Okay, yeah. So the Nassau Coliseum, it looks like they played that on January 1st. Interestingly enough.
Of 87?
Yeah, that's what it's showing here. I don't know if how accurate that date is.
Yeah, I wonder if that first show probably wasn't a full album show. I wonder if they just did some songs. I don't know.
What do you mean?
Well, I just think that Boston, I think that they, that first show I saw in Rochester at the War Memorial, I think that was the first time they did the album in its entirety.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's possible because
June 14th, 1987.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And then they went to Dallas. And then they did 3. Yeah, it's crazy, man. If you think about it, they did the Rochester War Memorial. That show sold out quick.
Oh, yeah.
And then they did the Cotton Bowl, which was the Texas Jam, 80,000. Then they did 3 nights in a row at the Spectrum. And then 5 nights in a row at Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. So I was pretty lucky to catch that tour.
Maybe that's where I saw them. Maybe I saw them in Jersey.
Yeah, they did 5 nights there. They did a 5-night run in Detroit.
Well, you got to remember, they hadn't toured since like 1978 or 9, probably.
Yeah, probably 9.
So, yeah, I mean, and interesting things before I get into mine real quick was, we had an old arena here called the Odd. And let's put it this way. It was not known for its sound quality of concerts. You would get a lot of reverb, a lot of muffled, and a lot of bad audio in that venue. But I'll tell you one thing, that Boston show was the best sounding show that arena ever had. It was almost close to perfection. I don't know if you can remember that from the Rochester War Memorial show you saw there.
Oh,
Tom.
For sure. Yeah, no,
it was unbelievable how it, compared to anybody else that came into town, the sound was just impeccable.
Yeah. Well, I think back then too, a lot of bands in the arena rock era, they had a tendency to overcompensate for whatever. They would just turn it up so loud that it wasn't even conversational. And that was sort of a thing for a while. I know my hearing is probably not what it was when I was a teenager, but concerts today are nowhere near as loud as they were back then. I mean, it was just, some of them were obscenely loud. So I think maybe one of the things that Scholz was smart enough to do was maybe put some speakers up around the arena beyond just the ones that are sitting on the stage. Because again, you see that too. You look at some of those old concert videos. They just threw the stacks on the stage, which didn't necessarily fill the auditorium very well, and it created a lot of dead spots, a lot of dead zones. So part of it mattered where you were sitting in the venue, and I'm sure that there's still a degree of that today. But yeah, sound has come a long way. I mean, the Grateful Dead had made some advances. But that became too expensive for them. But if there was a guy that was going to come up with a way to make an album sound good, it was going to be Scholz. And I remember the big, they had some kind of big organ that came up in the back of the show as well. They call it
Bertha. The name of the organ is Bertha, Big Bertha.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my number 2 is the same. We're in agreement again for the second time. Third Stage. And just like you, that was the first time I got to see Boston, and I thought it was fantastic. Without a doubt, the best Boston show I ever seen, and the only time I actually got to see him with Brad singing.
Did they do
Uh,
the record beginning to end? Because I thought by the
Yeah.
end of the tour they had scrapped that.
Nope, they did it. Well, I saw him
Okay.
more in the middle of the tour, because they toured all the way, I believe, till the end. What
October
I
it says here. Yeah, I mean they did 10 nights in Boston. 10 nights.
Wow.
Well, what Worcester to be exact. 10.
Yeah, it
There's some
looks.
there's some pro recordings from that.
Well, actually, you're right.
That
Boston.
stand in Worcester, and they sound great.
Yeah, you're right. The Buffalo show was one of the last ones.
Yeah.
Then they played 2 in Hartford, and then in Binghamton. It looks like it might have ended in. Interesting. Didn't know that. But it was great. Yeah, they played the whole album in its entirety, which at that point I didn't even realize they did that when I was there. I was just at the show, and I remember later on. I go, wow, they actually did play every song off the album. I go, wow, that's amazing. So, like you said, that was like the first time anybody probably really did that. So that was a good point there. I really But real quick, my three favorites off Third Stage before we go into number 1 is obviously Amanda's one of the best songs. Interesting on that. If you remember, that song actually was, I don't know if it was leaked to radio at one point early
It was,
on,
yes.
and then they had to pull it because of the whole problem with the Tom and his lawsuits and everything
I
else.
heard it. I heard it on the radio on the Manhattan rock station. Someone played it.
Yeah.
And there is a version on YouTube, and the midsection, I think, is slightly different.
Yeah.
It's barely noticeable. It's almost the exact same thing. And I think it leaked in 84, early 84.
Yeah, it was a couple years before the album, because I remember everybody was saying, "Where's this song? Where's this album?" And finally, it took a couple extra years before it saw the light of day officially. So yeah, that was an interesting thing, and it's funny how that song ended up working its way all the way up to number 1. All right, and so another one, the standout track for me though, actually, out of all the songs on the album, is no doubt is "I Think I Like It," and I'll tell you what, Mr. DiCarlo, you did an awesome job on that song, and I commend you. I thought he sounded great when he sang that at Art Park. I think I like it's probably one of my top 3 Boston songs, believe it or not. I just love that song. And Holly Ann's another great song on this album. So those are the ones I say stand out the most for me. But I do like every song on this album besides that. So
I love
all
that
right.
note that Brad Delp hits in Holly Ann.
Oh,
Although,
yeah.
of course, Tom tweaks his voice a little, but that note in Holly Ann is great.
All right, let's hear it. Number 1.
Could it be anything else but the debut album from 1976, Boston? It's a perfect album, as Tom would say, our Tom. It's well sequenced. And this was produced by a gentleman by the name of John Bolin and, of course, Tom Scholz. But as our Tom says, it's perfectly sequenced. Side 1 is just genius because you have, I need to look at my notes, More Than a Feeling, Into Peace of Mind, Into Foreplay and Long Time.
Mm-hmm.
And just that whole side is perfect. And Foreplay, Tom, is very proggy. That's where the prog first came in, I always thought. And my other favorite from the record on side 2, Hitch a Ride, which is up there. That's one of my favorite Boston songs. I love Hitch a Ride. Great song, but there are no Duff tracks on this record. It's a perfect album. It has to be number 1.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, perfect. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you took 2 songs, excuse me, if you took 2 songs from this record and spread them out throughout their catalog, they would have had 2 perfect songs on every record. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just incredible. It's like just reading them over. It's like you say them and you just want to sing them, you know, Peace of Mind. It's been such a long time. Man, what a great song that is. Smoking. I mean, Rock and Roll Band is like, you know, and they got 2 solid openers. I mean, Rock and Roll Band could have just as easily been song 1, side one, and Hitch a Ride. Oh my God. Yeah. Just kind of something about you. Let me take you home tonight. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is an album. You put it on, you play both sides, you love it. I mean, just man, if they were ever going to do a record beginning to end, why haven't they done this one? Even with the current lineup. I mean, it's just such, yeah. I mean, everybody, anybody who's ever heard this record just knows it and loves it.
And they haven't done anything since 2017. It's over 6 years now. No touring, no album news, nothing.
Yeah, Tommy DiCarlo does. He shows up out here. We live near Buffalo. I live in a town called Oakville, which is the town south of me, Batavia. He's coming here this summer with the guy from Dennis DeYoung's band who does Tommy Shaw's
August Zadra, Mr. Zadra.
Yeah. August Zadra.
He's like opening, and then it's going to be Jason Sheff from Chicago, and then Tommy DiCarlo. I'm guessing they probably have like a lot of the same guys playing on all three sets, I would assume.
Hey, Joey, before you speak, can I just add one thing I forgot to mention? The hand claps on the album add so much to it.
Yeah.
The hand claps are great. That's all I wanted to say.
I mean, the mix too, just the mix of the vocals versus the instruments. I mean, just mix, the mastering. I mean, it's just beautiful. I love, I mean, like, and I own a first press of this record, and it sounds just mind-boggling on vinyl.
Yeah, and that was 76. So yeah, I mean, that's just phenomenal how, at that time you knew that this band, sonically was amazing. They were ahead of their time.
Before Steely Dan's Asia.
Yeah.
A year
Man,
before.
I was just listening to some Steely Dan yesterday. That's another band that's it sonically. They just do stuff that make you shake your head.
Yeah. Becker and Fagan, man.
All right. So I would say on this album, to close out, obviously, because I'm still picking my number one here, I would say Smokin' is the song for me. That one always stood out the most, and it's sad. I don't know why, but it wasn't. They did such a long set when I saw them in that third stage tour, but they never played Smokin'. So I didn't know if it was something, because there's other songs they could have definitely substituted out. I didn't know if it was a hard song to sing live for Delp or what. But I'm glad DiCarlo did sing it when they came to Art Park. They kicked it off, played it second, and they nailed it. I mean, that was just great hearing that song live, because that was the only time I've ever got to see it live. So phenomenal. Smokin', and like Tom mentioned, Rock and Roll Band, they opened up with on the third stage tour, and what a great opening song. It's just amazing how great that sounded. When they went into that song, man, I'll tell you, that crowd at the Odd just erupted. That's got to be one of the, I would have to say, I of all my Odd concerts, I probably went to like over 25 shows in the Odd in my time, because you got to remember it closed in 1996. So the fact that I would say that's probably the biggest ovation I've ever seen to start a show in the Odd, from the start of a show, the way they opened up with Rock and Roll Band, it was just amazing how everybody just, man, it's like the whole scene, as soon as they hit the stage, everything just changed, man. It's like totally different scene and everything. And what else can be said about the album? You guys said it all. Just a great album and a great number one choice. And there was no doubt in my mind, and probably not in any of yours, exactly what album was going to be number one when when we started to get this band picked for ranking here. So yeah. So any other last things you want to bring up, Davey? You want to start mentioning the projects related to the band?
Could we go in chronological order?
Oh, however you want to do it.
Okay. In August of 1980, Barry Goudreau released his debut solo album, simply called Barry Goudreau. It reached number 88 on the American charts, and the single Dreams, which has Brad Delp singing on it, almost reached the Hot 100. It peaked at 103 before Tom Scholz gave the kill order on the album. He said, bury this album, because the record label, Epic Records, CBS, Sony, whatever you want to call it, at the time was Boston's label. And Tom said to the band, I'm taking a break after the Don't Look Back tour. So why don't you guys do whatever you want to do side projects, take a vacation, whatever. So Barry Goudreau did his solo record. Brad Delp sings on 6 of the 9 tracks. And Fran Cosmo, this is where he comes into Boston's orbit, so to speak. The spaceship guitar, that was my little joke there. But at any rate, Fran Cosmo sings on 3 tracks on the record. And the hype sticker on the album, the record company put a sticker on it that said, you've heard this sound, you know the guitar sound, the guitar sound of Boston, the debut album from Mr. Barry Goudreau. And once Tom Scholz got wind of that, he freaked the heck out. He told the record company, if you ever want another Boston record, you better bury this record, because I am the guitar sound of Boston, not Barry Goudreau. So the record label buried the record. And in what is now irony, of course, Sony never got another record from Boston because he moved to MCA by the time Third Stage came out. So it's a good record. It has a little bit, as Tom was saying before, of the Boston sound, but it doesn't nail that Boston sound. Goudreau is a really good player. He's varied, but he just doesn't have, I guess, the technical ability, the engineering, the way it was produced, the way it sounded. It sounds like Boston, but it's not a Boston record. But I'd rather hear this record than the last 2 Boston albums. Just my opinion.
I got you. Yeah, because if we would have mixed in the 3 side projects all into the Boston catalog, it would have been interesting to see where somebody's fell. Let's just talk about each one at a time instead of, so whatever you want to add about the Barry Goudreau album, Tom, go right ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking for it. I know we have a copy of it. It must still be downstairs because I just listened to it recently. But yeah, so I looked up all the kind of the backstory and everything like that. It's and I remember when it came out, because said it was and Barry's done interviews where he said, hey, that was record company that slapped that stuff on the album. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't trying to piss Tom off.
And then Tom fired him. I forgot to say, Tom fired him from the band after that. And he has
I don't know if it was because of that. I mean, if it was, it was, but I don't know. I think it sounds a little too close to Boston, in my opinion. If it was me and somebody went out and made a record that sounded that close to the stuff that we were doing together, I'd fire him. I'm just being honest with you. Okay. I mean, and he had Brad Delp singing on it. It's not, it was just, and then by the time he does Orion the Hunter, which is probably the next one that we're going to talk about, he gets a sound alike. What I find interesting is that somehow Barry Goudreau falls out of favor with Tom Scholz, but yet Fran Cosmo somehow falls in favor with him, and he was involved with the project as well, which is a bit of a head scratcher.
Strange how it works.
Yeah, the dynamics, the personality dynamics between all that is interesting, but I think it comes down to it. I don't know if I read this somewhere or if I talked to somebody that knew Brad Delp, but a lot of these guys, they just wanted to keep working, and remember too that, if you're Brad Delp or Barry Goudreau, as great as that first record is, the guy that's making all the money, he's going to be the guy that wrote the songs. You're not making, you're making money when you're on the tour. So if you're just sitting home waiting to make the next record, you're basically out of work, waiting.
No income. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Barry Goudreau, I just actually picked this album up recently on CD, and yeah, I was not too familiar with it before, believe it or not, but I'll tell you, yeah, I think it's definitely a solid album. I was kind of surprised at how like Tom said, how close they sounded to Boston. And, but obviously if you look at all the connections there, you got Siv on drums, you got Fran Cosmo, and Brad together on an album, and then of course Barry on guitars. So it's not a surprise that it would sound that close to Boston. You know, the only difference is it just didn't have the crisp production of Tom Scholz, and it didn't have his playing on it. But the guy that produced it was actually the same guy who produced the first Boston album, John Boylan, and
Yep.
Barry Goudreau himself. So that was interesting. So yeah, good album though. I think it's you know, I don't think any side project of Boston, in my estimation, was a bad one at all. I think they're all stand on their own, and you know, who knows what could have happened, you know, if they weren't stepping on, you know, Tom's shoes, you know, where he always felt like, you know, everybody was using Boston to get advance their career, which, you know, who knows? It's, you know, hit or miss on how everything always comes into play sometimes with these things.
Yeah,
So
it said it. It's you know it's a catch 22. I mean, you go back to Van Halen. You know, David Lee Roth makes a record and a solo record, and Eddie gets pissed off. And then even Dave said in interviews, he's like, I want to make sure there's no guitars on it because I didn't want to piss Eddie off. But you know, you don't know. I mean, it's egos are a fragile thing.
And when you add money, booze, and drugs into the mix, it becomes volatile.
Yeah.
All right, what you got for the next one?
Just to add to the Barry Goudreau record, I really like Hard Luck, the first song, Nothing to Lose, which Fran Cosmo sings, Dreams, which was the big single, the most Boston-esque song. And the real shame on this record is that the song Sailing Away is only 1 minute and 48 seconds. And it's a ballady type thing, and they should have extended it because the record is under 33 minutes. Why is it so darn short on the Barry Goudreau record? But moving on to 1984, we have Orion the Hunter, which came out May of 1984. It reached number 57 on the US charts. And So You Ran, the single from it, which I definitely remember hearing on the radio as well, hit the top 10 rock chart in Billboard. And it also hit the Hot 100. I'm just not sure where it landed. Do you know, Joey?
What one hit the top 100?
Where So You Ran, where it peaked on the Hot 100.
I think it was like 50, 58 or something like that.
Well, the album was 57.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the single.
Yeah.
But besides having Barry Goudreau on guitar, Fran Cosmo again on vocals, it features ex-Heart drummer Michael DeRosa, who's a great player, very Bonham-esque. He's a powerful player.
And former Buffalo Bills defensive end Bruce Smith is on bass.
Ah, that's where he's from. He's a football guy. I had no idea where he was from.
No, that's same name, different guy.
Okay. But
see, if you were from Buffalo, Davey, you would have gotten that reference.
Right over my head. So this album suffers from that 80s, those mid 1980s production tropes. That's what brings this record down a little. It sounds more like a band affair, I think, than the Barry Goudreau record. But some of the drum sounds, definitely the dated keyboard sounds, we've discussed this in the past, from the mid 80s, tend to bring this album down a little. But there's still some very good songs on it. So I like this album, but maybe not as much as the Barry Goudreau record.
Yeah, I agree with 100% on the production. I think it sounds of its time. And I had forgotten, you know, it's you know, because of the gaps between Boston records, Goudreau just knew how to slot a few of these babies in perfectly to kind of capitalize on the gaps in time for people that were looking for new Boston music. Because, you know, that was the crowd that was buying this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is one I don't own. Did you have a copy of it, Tom?
No.
No? Okay.
No. This, I don't think this was on vinyl. If it was,
it was. It was
yeah,
on vinyl.
Yeah. Well, then it must not be. It must be an expensive vinyl right now. I don't know it.
Yeah, it probably only had.
If there was any, that my favorite of the three is the next one that you're going to say. I mean, by far, and I've owned this on CD and just absolutely adore this record.
Yeah, I think the Orion the Hunter was only probably when it first came out, it was on vinyl, and then I doubt they repressed
Yeah.
it or anything like that, right?
No,
Right, Davey?
I think it came out in the mid '90s on Razor and Tie Records,
Yeah.
1996.
Oh,
They put it on
they
CD,
redid it. Okay.
and it may even be
Yeah.
on Rock Candy, where you got your Barry Goudreau from. It looked like from the picture you showed me.
Yeah, they do have the Rock Candy does have a release for the Orion the Hunter as well, but
Yeah.
it's hard to find
C-
right now.
CD, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think this was that great a record. I mean, I thought So You Ran was okay, but even
I
the
like
Barry
yes.
Goudreau stuff, solo stuff, was a little better than this one.
Yes.
Yeah, they did tour though, and they opened for Aerosmith
Yeah,
on the Back in
yeah,
the Saddle tour in some markets. So, but then after that, they pretty much everything just disappeared
yeah. I feel like
until
Cosmo's vocals are better on Walk On than they are on with Orion the Hunter. But
Yes, I
but
agree.
again,
oh
that's
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
production too. You know, that's you gotta. It's Tom Schultz the way he
Well,
gets
the songs are
sound.
better too, you know. So there's a
Yeah,
lot involved there for sure.
yeah.
All right, let's go to Tom's favorite here. Davey,
Woohoo!
Tell us about
Love
it.
it.
I was working in a record store at the time, like I did for many years, and I used to play this CD all the time from 1991, July of 1991. RTZ, Return to Zero, produced by Chris Lord Alge, if I'm pronouncing his name right, hopefully. And this is a very good record. It's a band album. It has Barry Goudreau on guitar, Brad Delp on vocals, and they wrote the bulk of the songs, along with the keyboard player, Brian Mays, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Maes, keyboard player. He co-wrote, I think, some of the best songs on the record. Tim Archibald on bass, and David Stefanelli on drums. And this is a very cohesive rock album. The first song is great, Face the Music. And I also like the last song, Return to Zero, the title track, I guess you can call it. And the big ballad, which I think peaked at around number 19 or 21 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart, Until Your Love Comes Back Around, is a really good 6-minute ballad. And it's a cohesive record. It's a very good record, and it's probably Tom's favorite. So why don't you take it away, Tom?
Yeah, no, I love this record. And it's, to me, it's not, it doesn't parrot Boston as much as the Goudreau album tried to, or even to a certain degree, Orion the Hunter. It's more, it's got a rock feel to it. I mean, this is a rock and roll record. There's none of the proggy stuff or anything like that. Just a lot of ear candy. Devil to Pay. I mean, that's just a straight ahead rocker. That's a lot of fun. That's one of my favorite cuts. Face the Music, very Boston-esque, but a nice Hard Time in the Big House. And then even the title cut, which is the last one on the record, is like, bam. I like it because I feel like this is a rock record. They weren't so hung up on replicating Boston as they were just singing some good old fashioned rock songs, and a long one too. It's 48 minutes.
It's longer than any Boston record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to rank this, if it were a Boston record, I would probably rank this as number 3. I would say this is better than Walk On, and maybe even better than Third Stage. I don't know. I mean, I do love this record.
I'd have it under those, but it's a very good record.
Yeah,
definitely better than the last 2 Boston records.
But I agree with everything you said about it, Tom. A great album. Definitely. That one that never really, you figure with a lot of the airplay that some of this got on the radio, even at that time, because you got to remember that's right around the time grunge started really kicking in.
Yeah,
it didn't sell as much as you would have hoped. So I would say if it would have came out like maybe 3 years earlier, probably would have gone platinum.
Even a year or 2 earlier.
Yeah, I just think it came out at the wrong time, unfortunately, because the way the musical scene was shifting there, unfortunately.
Just like the Alias record. Do you guys remember the Alias record?
Yep, I got it.
No, what's that?
Alias, it had 3 members from the 70s Heart band and 2 members from the, I think, Canadian band Sheriff.
Oh, yeah. It's tough because there is a Well, a couple things I think would be at play for the Return to Zero record. One, names are valuable. So you hear the name Boston, you really have to kind of tag it. And obviously, after what happened with the Barry Goudreau album, they were very conscientious about not aligning it too closely with Boston. And the age of the audience. I mean, I've always said that a band always takes a dip when their core audience starts having kids. And probably 91, you think you got 1974, your high school kids. By 1991, they're starting to have careers, families, they're going to less concerts, they're not listening to the radio as much. So, unless you're like one of those ubiquitous artists like Rolling Stones or something like that, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find an audience if you're not releasing a record under the name that people are familiar with. I mean, you
Right.
can put out a record Boston and just be Tom Schultz. It'll sell more than if you had the other four guys on another record called Massachusetts. That's just the nature of the beast.
It's the brand name. Yes.
Yeah, it's the brand name.
Yeah, and I think also too, the cool thing is they actually played RTZ. They only did a mini tour. It wasn't a long tour. They came here and played the old Simbads. You get them up by you anywhere there, Tom?
Yeah, they played I didn't see it, but they played a place called the Festival Tent. It was literally just a tent in the middle of downtown. They used to hold concerts. I actually saw Joe Bonamassa open up for B.B. King there, and John Mayall and a couple other interesting shows. But yeah, it was just a super ugly venue. It was a parking lot with a tent.
Super ugly venue.
It was just a big old white, nasty old tent with a stage that was set up in a parking lot in the middle of downtown. The parking was always horrible, and the sound quality. I mean, yeah, tents just aren't good for concerts. That just absorbs all the sound. So, but yeah, no, I remember. As I said, I remember when they came through. But at that time, again, I was young, I was married, I had a family, had a horrible wife. Eventually, got rid of her.
Jeez. Interesting. I'm looking at the set list from RTZ in Cleveland, Ohio that they played in 1991 there. They did like the whole album. And then they played...
there's a video online with them doing some Boston songs and stuff. It's a horrible visually, but you get a pretty good sense of the sound.
Yeah, they only played 2 Boston songs, weirdly enough, though. Probably didn't want to piss Tom off too much.
What was it? More Than a Feeling and Foreplay Long Time? Is that the two?
Nope.
I think
Let Me Take You Home Tonight and Long Time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, weird. But yeah, so interesting with these side projects. I think like I said, anything Boston related is a good thing. There's nothing bad, whether it's a side project or anything Barry Goudreau related. Well, will we see any other kind of Boston offshoot anywhere anytime soon? Who knows? I mean, it's weird how Fran Cosmos kind of dropped off the face of the earth, when it comes to recording. He came to town a couple times.
Oh God, yeah, he was here all the time. He recorded a live DVD at Rapids Theater in Niagara Falls, New York. I mean, he was good buddies with our promoter friend there, Ross. Yeah, we used to bring him here all the time, and he was playing here about every 3-4 months.
Did you get to see him?
No.
Oh wow, some Boston.
Yeah. Come on, man. I saw Boston. Jeez. You know what? I deserve all the crap that you give me, Joey, because I give you crap all the time. So I have to learn to take it better. But that you played that very well.
No, I just figured that maybe you would have gone to it. That's all. I didn't know.
No.
That's why I asked you.
The problem was the guy came here so much. I feel like, this is why I miss Stevie Ray Vaughan when he came around the last time, because I'm just like, oh, he'll be back. Yeah. Don't do that, folks. Don't ever think that the guy that plays your area a lot is going to come back, because sometimes they don't and sometimes they die. Yeah, it's sad.
I got to see Stevie Ray Vaughan. He opened for Robert Plant.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, she's very lucky. Yeah.
But I want to mention Barry Goudreau does have a newish album and a new band called Barry Goudreau's Engine Room. And they did put a CD out, but nowadays anyone could put a CD out, and he has no big record label. It's on an indie label. So there's no promotion. So no one knows about it really.
Yeah.
Yep.
What about this Delp and Goudreau? Did you ever hear anything about that?
I don't know if they ever released anything. I think they were demos. May have
Yeah,
been
there's like a bunch of
bootleg
there's a
CD.
bunch of stuff. I think it's from what I remember. I think that was just stuff they were kicking around that eventually turned into Return to Zero. Because there's actually a couple like Return to Zero records beyond the first one, but
There's
it's
one
not.
called
But they weren't. They weren't
Lost. Yeah.
right. No, I think it's just like the lost recordings or something. And
Mhm.
you know, if you wanna find music by like demos and extra tracks, all you got to do is just die, and then people will find all your old stuff and put it out. I mean, that's just the sad reality. You get a guy like Brad Delp, he passes away, and you don't have to get permission from his estate usually, or maybe the estate's like, we'll take the money, but that's where a lot of that stuff just sort of surfaces.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, Boston, I mean, Tom Schultz, I can't imagine him allowing a lot of bootleg stuff to come out.
Oh, there were back in the day, in the 90s and 2000s. We
Yeah.
used to carry a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I might have some. I'm not even sure. Can't remember. Hey, Joey, could I just say one more thing before we
Yeah.
sign off?
Mhm.
I just want to mention my new YouTube channel, Cretan Classics. And I just put up a Zebra video, a ranking of the Zebra albums, which is, luckily, and I'm very happy, my most viewed video so far. So
Nice.
Cretan Classics also, thank you. Cretan Classics also on YouTube.
And of course, tuning in with Tom, where we talk about The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway every episode.
You got anything recently on there, Tom?
Every
No,
Tuesday.
I'm thinking I do Turntable Tuesday with Tom, but that's not on my YouTube
another
channel.
one.
You just have to follow me on Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, I was gonna do something. I can't remember what it was. I'm interviewing JY from Styx
Nice.
Thursday, which I'm excited. Yeah.
All right.
Ask him about a new record, please.
A new Styx record?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're working on one. But he didn't have much to do with the last two.
I always thought he was going to retire soon, and that's why they brought the young guy in. The dark haired guy. What's his name?
Yeah, you know what? Joey
think
and I
of it.
saw him on the Shaw Blades tour. Will Ivankovic is his name.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think he's a neighbor of Tommy's, and I think Tommy's always kind of needed a songwriting partner. I don't know where his deficiencies could possibly be. I mean, the guy's written some incredible music, but Will he obviously enjoys collaborating with him, and they both live in Nashville, whereas JY, I believe, still lives in the Chicago area.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't forget, Tommy did a lot of great songs with Jack Blades too. They wrote a lot of great music together. So yeah, Tommy he writes and him and Will basically were the brains of behind the album, the last two Styx albums. So
Right. Yeah.
Crash of the Crowns and good old
But I'll ask him, Davey.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Tell him
guys.
I said hello.
I will.
Sounds good. That's a wrap on this episode. And like you
Okay.
said, make sure you visit these guys on their channels. And make sure to check back soon as we will have more content as time goes along here.
And thanks for
till
having
then-
us today.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Joey.
care, guys.